everyone! Welcome to the latest Simulacrum showcase of Tower of Fantasy. Our star of the day is very special. She is a Gestos network core code with self-awareness, who has iterated and evolved independently to eliminate the virus. She is a girl named Voidpiercer. But Voidpiercer's background isn't the only thing that makes her special. She is also the first simulacrum with the ability to adapt to any element in Tower of Fantasy. Let's get to know our new simulacrum, Nemesis Voidpiercer, and her weapon, Star of Oblivion, together. Star of Oblivion is an altered weapon, and its trait, Elemental Tuning, is its most interesting feature. Elemental Tuning allows Star of Oblivion to change into any element, so it can match the element of the other two weapons it's paired with. Unlike Nola, who can only switch between stats using settings, Star of Oblivion's stat changes automatically. For example, when Star of Oblivion is paired with two weapons that have Flame as their main stat, meaning they are either Flame physical weapons or Flame weapons, the Star of Oblivion will adapt itself to have the Flame physical dual stat and the Flame main stat. The same logic applies to combinations of other elements. However, if the main stats of the paired weapons are different, or if two altered weapons are paired with it, Star of Oblivion will retain its altered stat. Of course, when Star of Oblivion changes its stats, it will gain the common traits of dual stat weapons. When three altered weapons are equipped together, Star of Oblivion will activate Chaotic Wave, which will reduce the final damage of any target hit by 15% for 5 seconds. As for fixed damage, Star of Oblivion will activate Detachment Fixed Damage when it is in the Altered Damage Flame Physical Volt Frost stat. It will activate on-field fixed damage in the Frost Volt Physical Flame stat. Alright, that's all for Elemental Tuning. Let's move on to Voidpiercer's combat abilities. As a weapon that can have any element, it's only natural that Voidpiercer performs well as a main DPS and as an off-field damage boost. In teams composed of physical, frost, or 3 altered damage weapons, Voidpiercer works well as the main and secondary DPS. In Flame and Volt teams, Voidpiercer is more effective off-field, providing a damage boost. In practical combat, Voidpiercer usually starts her rotation with her discharge skill. Her discharge skill not only can inflict significant damage, it can also be followed directly with her weapon skill during cast. Voidpiercer will summon her doppelganger to simultaneously cast discharge and weapon skills, which streamlines the operation. Voidpiercer's weapon skill can be used in 2 different modes, a quick tap and a long hold mode to cater to the 2 types of weapon rolls. Let's start with the long hold weapon skill, Void Pursuit, which performs best when Voidpiercer is on field. After using Void Pursuit, Voidpiercer will create Boundary Zone, and enemies in this zone will be slowed down. While this zone is active, if you switch back to Star of Oblivion, you can use her discharge skill, Void Annihilation, without consuming any charge. But keep in mind that using Voidpiercer's discharge skill will immediately remove the boundary zone, so you can only use it once without any cost. In addition, Void Pursuit will also fire missiles that deal damage and put a pursuit mark on the locked-on target. While Boundary Zone is active, and there is a target with the pursuit mark, a normal attack will trigger Pursuit, which teleports Voidpiercer to that target from afar and deals damage. In a boss battle, Pursuit can help you maintain a safe distance to secure a suitable DPS environment. But remember that Pursuit can only be triggered once every 4.5 seconds. By the way, using Voidpiercer's dodge attack while Boundary Zone is active will also trigger missiles and put a pursuit mark on the locked-on target. Okay, let's move on to her weapon skill. Voidpiercer will gain a new skill, Obliteration Blade, after Boundary Zone has been active for 10 seconds, or after she completes the final segment of a normal attack string while Boundary Zone is active. The most important thing is that casting Voidpiercer's weapon skill will trigger Dark Star, which is a series of effects that will vary based on the different element stats of Star of Oblivion. This is the core mechanism of Voidpiercer. When Star of Oblivion is Flame, Voidpiercer's weapon skill will continuously burn the target and boost flame damage. During the damage boost, any following hits from any weapon will trigger additional damage. When Star of Oblivion is Frostbolt, it will receive a final damage boost, and Voidpiercer will deal continuous DMG off-field. When it is Physical Flame, Star of Oblivion will also receive a final damage boost, and subsequent attacks during the damage boost period will trigger an AoE explosion. When it is Volt Frost, it gains a Volt damage boost, and subsequent attacks during this period will also trigger additional AoE damage. As for altered damage, when Boundary Zone is removed, when Obliteration Blade or Voidpiercer discharge skill is cast, the total damage dealt by the Authorizer inside Boundary Zone will be tallied and applied once again to all targets within range. This damage has a maximum limit and is not affected by any damage boost. So why should you use Boundary Zone when Voidpiercer is the on-field DPS? That is because after Boundary Zone is activated, Voidpiercer's usual normal attack and dodge attack will be replaced. The zone is also linked to the Physical Flame, Frost Volt, and altered damage effects of Darkstar, and will deal various additional damage. The Quick Tap mode performs better when she is off-field. Tapping the skill will trigger the weapon skill, Starfall Cleave, which deals high multiplier damage. It will also activate different Darkstar effects based on the element stats of Star of Oblivion. Note that the Darkstar effect of the altered element cannot be triggered due to its dependency on the Boundary Zone. Compared to Voidpiercer's complex combat mechanisms, her star rating effects are relatively simple. 1 star increases pursuit damage and adds a slow effect. 3 star ignores a certain amount of the target's resistance, and the first use of Voidpiercer's discharge skill in a battle will not consume charge. 5 star gains a substantial shield when using her skills, enhancing survivability. 6 star further enhances her damage capabilities. Finally, we're at the practical combat and team recommendation section. Let's introduce another unique skill of Voidpiercer, Divine Arrival. This skill can be triggered by selecting a world boss on the world map and clicking the Divine Arrival button, which will teleport Voidpiercer directly next to the boss, saving you a lot of time. In a physical weapon team, Voidpiercer will be the on-field DPS, and the other 2 weapons will serve as supports to boost damage. Hold down the skill button to activate Boundary Zone and enhance the final damage of Voidpiercer's weapon. Stack Entropic Surge and repeatedly detonate them, using normal attacks and dodge attacks to deal high damage. Spreading Entropic Surge stacks after defeating enemies allows the skill to deal significant damage to crowds. In a Frost team, Voidpiercer can significantly boost her own final damage once she uses her skill. She can also deal continuous off-field damage. It's best to start the rotation with Nola as the on-field Frost DPS, triggering the second part of her skill for a Frost damage boost. Then, use Grey Fox's skill before activating Voidpiercer's Tap and Hold skill, positioning her as the on-field DPS. In a Flame team, Voidpiercer works better as a support. Her skills will boost flame damage and can inflict effects like burn and chaos on the target. Using other weapons will also trigger additional damage from these effects. After using Voidpiercer and Nola's skills to boost damage, use Acerata as the on-field DPS. In a Volt team, Voidpiercer also works best as a support. Her skills will boost Volt damage and grant a charge effect, which increases the damage of the next 10 attacks. After using Voidpiercer and Nola's skills to boost damage, use Meryl Ironheart as the on-field DPS. In an altered damage team, the tally generated when Voidpiercer's Boundary Zone is removed can double the total damage of all weapons during the time Boundary Zone is active. Note that switching back to Star of Oblivion will trigger the discharge skill and end the Boundary Zone. Therefore, you need to plan the order of your on-field weapons. It's best to first let Voidpiercer be the DPS for a while after she creates Boundary Zone, before switching to Nola as the DPS and casting Nola's second skill, and finally switching back to Voidpiercer for the tally. all for this showcase. Thanks for watching.